How to implement a software-defined network security fabric in AWS, sponsored by AWS Marketplace. My name is Carol Auth with the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Dave Shackelford, SANS Analyst, and Sagar Kosnes, Partner Solutions Architect at AWS. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. We will be answering them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Dave.
Awesome. Thanks, Carol, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Excited to be here, joined again by Sagar. And in this presentation today, what we're going to be talking about, obviously, is sort of what's going on out there in the world of software-defined networking and really network security altogether. And this is a big topic, and there's a lot of things that have been changing over the past couple of years. And for organizations that have been steadily shifting assets and workloads and infrastructure out into the cloud, the good news is there's actually a lot out there. There's a lot of capabilities that have really matured and significantly, even in some cases, enhanced the security postures of organizations moving to cloud. So again, it's great to see this. I think a lot of network professionals that I've worked with and have spoken to in the past, I think felt like, hey, we've got these blinking boxes and racks that, we're really going to have a hard time emulating that. Moving out into the cloud, we're going to find that these sort of classic traditional network platforms and control sets just aren't there. And maybe at one point that was true, but I think today, in fact, I know today, we've got an incredible wealth of different types of controls and platforms and frameworks and architectural models that we can take advantage of. So with that, let's go on ahead and get right into things. And as you can see, this is a pretty loaded and stacked agenda here. So we've got a ton of different things to talk about. Now, I'm not going to belabor the sort of set of bullet points on this. I'll just start us off by saying, I'm going to introduce the topic of what's really happening out there with this move towards the software-defined data center. And then I'm going to get right into all the different types of software-defined network security with some cloud-native controls, some core network security program and building that out in a cloud-based model out there in the AWS marketplace. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. And I'm certainly going to be throwing some around here in the do it in a software-defined fashion. So here we are. We've got this software-defined data center in front of us. And what we found, as I was alluding to just a moment ago, is that there's a lot of really cool innovation things out into the cloud are starting to sort of balance this. DDoS scenarios occur. And again, this is something that a lot of organizations just didn't do. So network traffic, and probably can do so far better than the majority of organizations on the planet. And so what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a fabric layer that is available for DDoS protection services. So, I mean, first off, just to note this, anybody that's deployed in AWS gets a standard plan. So in other words, if you get some sort of run-of-the-mill DDoS just arbitrarily hitting, say, the Amazon need some additional and more robust controls, well, when this came out, because what it introduced was some hope for organizations that didn't want to go out and try to have to solve this all on their own. You can take advantage of the experience and the skill set within the AWS team for just about everything across the board. Forensic reporting, you get assistance from their DDoS response team, some cost result of cloud. So super cool. We've got a lot of other things out there that we want to take a look at. And I think, we could probably spend hours here just hanging out and talking shop about all the different types of objects and elements in the cloud that sort of constitute part of your overall network security architecture. But I'm going to hit a few of them and just sort of highlight a couple things because, again, we don't have enough time to go into all the detail for each one of these. But, look, you got to connect things. And there's a lot of different models of connectivity today. And every organization is a little different, right? So for some organizations, you build out your cloud infrastructure and it's entirely oriented towards internet accessibility. So in that case, well, an internet gateway is stood up and it's a very simple object that gives you a referenceable object ID to build out things like your routing and, kind of controlling ingress, egress to the cloud environment. So that's about as easy as it gets. In fact, I'm not overstating this. It's quite honestly, it's a 30-second endeavor to create an internet gateway in a VPC in AWS and then start connecting things to it. So that's amazing. If you want to have a private connection, going back to your own on-premise type organization, or even as part of somewhat of a sort of WAN infrastructure, you can use a virtual private gateway to establish something like an IPsec tunnel. You can build out some different gateway models now, especially for larger scale infrastructure, using things like direct connect gateways if you want to be able to get that sustained and managed bandwidth where, hey, I need a guaranteed gig per second or 10 gigs per second, for example. And I want to be able to really build out, say, a large dedicated set of pipes between different environments and so forth, of which, my AWS infrastructure is a piece. Well, again, that's now available and has been for quite some time. And now you've also got this sort of cool, almost hub and spoke model that you can facilitate very, very scaled out VPC and intra-connected VPC infrastructure using a transit gateway. So all of these things are great. You've got a lot of opportunities to build out very flexible hub and spoke or interconnected components and network infrastructure within the AWS cloud. Now, you've got things like NAT gateways and NAT instances that can as well. So again, you got options, and that's really what this comes down to, is having those options. Elements. Your architecture won't look quite the same because it isn't the same. like Visio diagrams and network diagrams. And I'm speaking for myself here, guys, for sure. I've created terrible diagrams and seen more than I ever cared to in my career. But every one of them has to have some sort of router object represented to show where the routing is taking place. And that's no joke here. It's the same thing, right? So you've got the exact same sort of model in place saying, okay, here's our router object. But honestly, the routing within something like an AWS cloud is really a set of route definitions. It's a completely fabric encapsulated mechanism by which routing takes place. It's not quite the same thing as saying, hey, I actually have a blinking, routing object there. Routing is just handled. So you do have route tables, you have routing elements and entries within those route tables, but for about a million different reasons, that routing itself is in fact taking place sort of on the fabric of AWS, and that keeps it much more streamlined, make sure that there's incredible resiliency and high availability around all of your routing types of entries. But routing, of course, is what it is. And I will say, as somebody, again, that spent a lot of time in the trenches as a network engineer, it's vastly simplified comparatively when you go and dig into all the various types of, internal gateway protocols, external types of gateway protocols. There's just so much incredible sort of complexity that can be introduced in routing. And you can certainly build out some of that separately and independently above and beyond the cloud native routing that you have available to you. But I love simplicity where I can get it, and this is a place that I can get it. So again, routing, anything you need to route in the cloud, you can route in the cloud. Now, load balancing, I'm not going to spend too much time on, and here's why. Because the load balancing in the AWS cloud is fantastic, and realistically, it's on par with most of the major types of load balancing that organizations out there have been reliant on for years. So if I'm trying to bring in traffic and control it at a very, very highly scalable and available sort of rate, you can do exactly that using all the varieties of ELB within the cloud. So elastic load balancing was built to accommodate staggering quantities of traffic and also different forms of traffic controls and policies. So you can get more of a network-oriented load balancer. You can get more of an application-centric load balancer. You've got lots of different heartbeat checks and things that can be put into place, which of course everybody needs to ensure that we've got availability and we can constantly. All that's there for you. And this is one place where I've been they've been built for this kind of scale and sustainability for a very long time. So this is not something that needed a lot of maturity. Nonetheless, these things have advanced and evolved and matured. Today, native load balancing, perhaps in addition to some third-party solutions, but at least somewhere in the mix, you're probably going to find some cloud-native load balancing as well. So moving along and looking at some of the other pieces that we've got there, again, load balancing is one that we've had for a long time, but I'll say something like a web app firewall isn't. So, granted, web app firewalls have been around for, what are we getting close to 2 decades now. I certainly remember web app firewalls coming around back in the early 2000s, maybe the mid 2000s. And they've evolved and gotten more mature progressively with more capabilities, et cetera, since then. But, really, up until, I'd say, even just the past couple of years, if you wanted a web app firewall in the cloud, well, you could probably get one. But it was inherently always coming down to a third party. So you go into the marketplace and you could find your preferred solution provider, and you could build that out and integrate that capability into your cloud if you wanted or needed to. And that's still the case today. So there's all sorts of great third-party solutions that, for a lot of reasons, might be something you want to stick with, especially if you've got a lot of background and experience with some of the top players in this space, and you really want to stick with them, right? So for example, you've got a lot of disparate sites. Well, that might make a great case for continuing down the road with that same provider and putting something like that in front of your AWS web-enabled infrastructure. Cool, that's fine. And I think it's good to have options, as I've said, but you've also got cloud-native WAFs that are right there as a service layer. And to me, where that always kind of bubbles up and just starts to make a ton of sense is looking at some of the, maybe smaller or less mature enterprises or organizations out there that really want to put a WAF in place, but don't want to go through some of the headaches of integration or going through third-party licensing. And they just want to, get themselves some inherent protection that sits in front of their web apps and web services and protects them against, common attacks, the OWASP top 10, common authentication types of attacks, that, that standard set of things to just give you that boost for your web application infrastructure. Awesome. You can get that. That's available to you now, and it's super simple to set up. And again, that's evolved too. So I'm not suggesting that the cloud native web app firewall service is simple. It's got lots of really cool capabilities, but you can pick and choose where and how you want to implement those differing types of options if you're looking to introduce web app firewalls into the mix. Coming across some of the different types of appliances, since we're talking about that, this is something that has really ratcheted up in the past 5 years. And so there was a period of time, I remember actually talking about cloud security all the way back in, it must have been 2011, 2012. And candidly, there were some gaps out there in the market landscape, looking back at some of the really well-known, super well-known network providers and network security providers, many of whom all of you would know and probably have dealt with at some point along your travels, really just didn't have stuff out there. They didn't have these sort of inherent cloud-enabled solutions where if you were trying to keep the same provider and you were trying to bring them into your cloud infrastructure and maintain things with them, you couldn't. That's just not true today. I'd say the vast majority of enterprise-grade network security is now available in the cloud natively, and that is nothing but good for us. And a lot of people ask me, well, Dave, what's the driver here? Like, why would you want to put in a network security gateway or more of a robust, next-gen firewall or platform like this? Well, there's really three core compliance. And so let's face it, if you've got some external three, honestly, these are mature providers in a lot of cases. And the good news for us, again, those are there, and you can must. You're not going to go build out an infrastructure in, East ACLs, and there are definitely different ACLs really are managed at the subnet level. And so what does that mean? It means that, any traffic coming into your VPC, it's hitting network ACLs first, and then moving on, assuming it's allowed, to security groups. Security groups are like the final word in cloud native access control around your workloads, which means For the most part, you're going to want to use security groups, especially since they are stateful and really sort of match up more with what we'd consider traditional firewall rules to look like. Well, where's network ACL come into the mix? Well, network ACLs really do have their purpose, and they're almost best always served within the context of explicit allows or denies, right? If you know something's good and you want to just permanently allow it, say your gateway address space or something, cool. That's a great place to do that. If you have some, bad mojo out on the internet, or you've got some nasty bogons out there that you want to cut out of the mix in terms of traffic that's ingress for you, that's another great opportunity to just drop it into a network ACL. But again, you'll find that balance. So both of these tend to be heavily used, again, even with other types of third-party platforms in the mix as well. So look at these as real lightweight, super simple, and very cost-effective ways to augment and enhance your network security strategy too. So the other kind of cool thing too is that progressively in the past few years, AWS has really just added lots of great monitoring and logging and now, since we're talking software-defined infrastructure, there's really but I think we all have to acknowledge that identity is interwoven across the fabric of all of it. So when you're building out infrastructure and you're isolating assets and segments and resources within the cloud, you're going to definitely need IAM. Two different things to keep in mind here. Number one, creating roles and privileges for the folks that are going to be building out and maintaining network architecture and assets. So your network team should have some visibility and access into the cloud for managing things that maybe appropriately fall under their control or oversight. So that's number one. But number two, everything in a software-defined data center is a piece of software. Not to create a circular argument, but software objects have asset orientations that are deeply mired in identity. And as such, we surely need to be paying attention to the role assignments and the interconnectivity across all of those pieces. And identity is really that glue that holds it all together. So again, identity definitely plays a role here, especially as you're just discussing things like isolation and segmentation. Now, one of the questions I get asked all the time is, hey, what's the deal with this whole SASE, right? Secure Access Service Edge. Well, this is emerging, right? It's rapidly gaining some traction, and it's really sort of a unification strategy that's bringing in things like SD-WAN, so software-defined wide area networking for interconnectivity across branch offices and, really any locations, as well as an entire brokering model of security as a service in the cloud. Now, you start putting those two things together, and ultimately you'll end up with some capabilities that we've traditionally seen in things like identity as a service, maybe content delivery networks, and definitely cloud access security brokers. So you stir it all up, and ultimately you get this thing called SASE. But SASE is going to become the norm. So yes, it is yet another Gartner acronym that just, got lobbed off into the stratosphere, but it's probably one that's going to stick for the foreseen couple years because it is something that is rapidly becoming an architectural element of how we interconnect different types of environments as well as our cloud and have that security layering in place alongside it, right? So the sort of final things I'll start wrapping up my section here with. Number one, it's all software-defined infrastructure, and we can templatize pretty much everything there. So what that means is that infrastructure as code should absolutely be a big part of the network security picture. And of course, most of you probably know that, right? So you're used to dealing with things like CloudFormation templates, or maybe things like Terraform if you're building that out at a larger scale or what have you. But ultimately, you're defining all of these different types of assets and objects and security orientation in a template model, and this is nothing but good for us. So for software-defined cloud networking, we can really define all those cloud-native controls, the interconnectivity, routing, the load balancing. We can put third-party object and asset models into that mix as well. And again, this is something that we really all need to embrace. And I think it's been a bit antithetical for networking teams that are trying to sort of get up to speed on cloud to say, well, everything's just in this, sort of template file. But, well, it is. And again, that's a good thing for us because we can maintain that and consistently sort of take that down the road with us and build on top of it. So I'm going to wrap up this section with a couple next steps, which means where do you go? What do you do coming out of this whole discussion of objects and assets and services, and really just talking about some best practices. And there's definitely a lot of them. And as usual, I tend to smush way too much stuff into a single slide. It's what I'm known for, but here we are. And I'd say, look, you should definitely consider the concept of things like transit zones or VPCs where you're building out your security capabilities. Make sure you're heavily relying on the entire spectrum of network security capabilities. So some cloud native, and also perhaps things like third-party virtual appliances. Build out things in multiple availability zones for redundancy and availability. Make sure you're thinking about things like DDoS protection and WAF services. Get all of the different types of monitoring you can get. So that's VPC flow logs, it's deep packet inspection and forensics, potentially through things like VPC traffic mirroring, and make sure that you're thinking about that glue, that identity aspect as well. And again, also putting things into a templatized format will just make your life better and easier and more sustainable in the coming years as well. So lots of things condensed into a nice set of bullets here. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to Sagar.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. That was amazing. That was some great guidance on network architecture design, and you touched upon some really, really good foundational concepts around networking in the cloud in general. So thank you for that. And my name is Sagar Khasnis, and I'm a partner solutions architect with AWS Marketplace. I've primarily been in the technology space for about 10 years now, and have been a consultant and architect in various roles over these years. And today I primarily work with AWS customers who are asking how they can run their cloud operations in the most effective way possible. And as you know, and you've probably seen, network design is one of the key foundational concepts that customers need to get their head around in order to build on the cloud. Really, you're building any service, you will need to understand the different network-related components that are available out there, and how you can start to connect all of those. And really, based on this experience with customers around network design, I'd like to spend some time talking about how you can implement a software-defined network fabric in AWS. And really, today we'll be talking about a quick snapshot of AWS networking services that you can use. And this is in no way, a deep dive on each of the services. And as Dave mentioned, it could take hours and hours to talk about each service because these are so expansive. But the goal here is to give you an index of services available, and how you can start to leverage them in your environment to make the best use of AWS. We'll also talk about some solution sellers in AWS Marketplace, and how customers are really finding success with these solution sellers. Now, before we dive into any details, I want to take a moment and appreciate the scale of operations at AWS. Now, one of the biggest advantages of the AWS cloud is that it enables you to deploy globally in minutes. You can, in this diagram, you can see that there's so many different points that are available for connectivity across the world. It's really extensive. So, to break it down for you, AWS has a concept of region, right? So, a region is a physical location around the world where we cluster our data centers. We call each group of these logical data centers an availability zone. Now, using AWS, customers today can leverage 73 availability zones across 23 geographic regions worldwide. We've also announced plans for 12 more availability zones, as well as 4 more regions in Indonesia, Italy, Japan, and Spain. in the coming future. Now, the global network of AWS edge locations also consists of 26 points of presence, or POPs, as you might have heard them, and these span across 84 cities across 42 countries. So really, it's a huge amount of infrastructure around the world that you can get access to immediately once you start working with the AWS cloud. And internally we say that there's no compression algorithm for experience, and especially when it comes to scale, security, and performance. And I can confidently say that we have the most mature cloud platform. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. At AWS, 90% of what we build is driven by what customers tell us they need, right? So, based on all of these requests, we're continuously innovating as well as releasing new services and features for our customers. Now, I want to talk about a few AWS services that can help with networking. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. We can talk about the networking capabilities that AWS have for hours and hours, but it's important to note that some of these that I'm talking about are foundational, as well as some of the new services that you may not have heard about. So the first one I want to kind of touch base upon is Amazon VPC, right? So this is the most foundational level networking service that we have, which lets you provision a logically isolated section of the AWS cloud where you can start to launch AWS resources in a virtual network that you define, right? So you have control over the entire virtual networking environment, including the selection of your own IP address range, creation of subnets, configuration of route tables and network gateways, and really decide whether you're using IPv4 or IPv6 for your VPC. So really, that's the foundational component. You can start to combine Amazon VPC with the new service that we've launched, and Dave touched upon this too. It's called VPC traffic mirroring, which is another service that lets you monitor and as well as replicate all of your network traffic to uncover any insights and detect any potentially malicious traffic. If you're using things like AWS Transit Gateway to connect various networks and various VPCs together, you can start to use that with traffic mirroring to make sure you can analyze your traffic effectively. Now, additionally, you can also look at things like VPC ingress routing, in which you can segment VPC traffic based on workload and route it to virtual appliances in different places in your environment. So you might have a business unit that's using a separate virtual appliance than the other. You can start to use ingress routing to send specific traffic around to different BUs in your workspace. Now, we also have a service called AWS WAF, which is nothing but a web application firewall, which gives you the ability to create security rules that block common attack patterns, right? So if you've dealt with SQL injection or cross-site scripting alongside some of the other application level attacks out there, this is a service that can start to filter out some of those patterns and help you prevent against those attacks. Now, it has a full-featured API as well that you can use to start to automate deployment for your web application firewall. And then one more service I want to quickly touch upon is AWS Direct Connect, right? So this is a service that allows you to seamlessly connect your resources in the AWS cloud to the ones that you have in your own private cloud. And we provide a dedicated direct connection to do that, so that it doesn't really have to go over the internet to carry your traffic. So really, these are some of the services you should start thinking about while defining your network architecture. Now, let's dive deeper into VPC traffic mirroring as well as VPC ingress routing. Now, when you're implementing network segmentation within your environment, you can leverage VPCs as well as VPC traffic mirroring to enhance any traffic monitoring that you have in your environment, which for traffic that comes in as well as goes out of your environment, right? So with mirroring, what you can do is you can take any traffic that flows into the network of your Amazon EC2 instances, copy it, and then send it to an outside source for further inspection, right? So this mirror target, as we call it, can be in the same VPC, or it can be in a completely separate VPC that's connected via AWS Transit Gateway. Now, you can build your own analyzer. You can use an open source one that's available out there in the market, or you can use one of the third party options available in AWS Marketplace. Again, completely up to you. I've seen all three patterns out there. So, really depends on your networking team and what they prefer. Now, it's also important to mention that we have a feature called VPC ingress routing, which provides additional flexibility for redirecting network traffic. And really, you can start to segment your VPC traffic based on individual workload and then direct specified traffic to a third party source, if you will, before it reaches your final destination, right? So if you have a workload that cannot sustain getting attacked or getting traffic patterns that are not compatible, you can throw in a sandwich like pattern with a third party source to filter that traffic using ingress routing. Now, all of these features will really start to kind of allow you to hone in on specific areas of your network and also help you enable rapid response to possible incidents and maintaining the holistic visibility that you require in your environment. Now, one more question that I've seen increase over the last few years is that customers often tell us that, hey, I don't want to have any of my traffic out there on the internet. I want to limit exposure to the public internet completely, right? What if there are times when customers want no exposure to the public internet while traversing between different AWS regions, or if they're using a SaaS provider, they want to make sure that they don't have traffic flowing over the internet and then reaching their SaaS provider. So how do we solve for that? And the answer really is AWS Private Link. So what Private Link does is it simplifies the security of your data shared with cloud-based applications by eliminating the exposure to the data to the public internet, right? So all of the data, once you set a private link, all of your data will start to flow through a backbone network that AWS owns and directly traverses over that backbone network and not the internet, right? So some examples would be if you have your data center out there and if you have a workload which needs to access an Amazon S3 bucket, right? You could create a private link endpoint and make sure that the data that you pull from the S3 bucket or push into the S3 bucket goes through a private network link instead of going through the internet. Now, some of the common use cases are securing your SaaS applications, or maintaining regulatory compliance, or even migrating to a hybrid cloud environment, right? So there's a lot of different use cases for this, and I've seen this increase quite a bit over the last years. Now, let's talk about AWS WAF for a little bit. So I mentioned this before, but the AWS Web Application Firewall gives you control over which traffic to allow or block to your web applications by defining customizable web security rules, right? So with WAF, you can start to create custom rules that block common attack patterns such as SQL injection, as well as cross-site scripting. You can start to apply these new roles and apply them within minutes, really letting you respond quickly to changing traffic patterns. So, once you start if you have a monitoring application, or if you start to monitor and receive certain malicious traffic, um, you can immediately start to apply new rules to make sure that the traffic stops coming in. And then there's also a full-featured API that we made available with WAF, and this really helps you as a DevOps engineer, helps you to automate and create those CloudFormation templates to make sure that your WAF rules are being set up in an automated fashion and in a consistent fashion in your environment. So that's really important when you operate at scale, is to automate some of these rules across different accounts, different BUs, to make sure that it's really a consistent experience and your networking team is not doing all of the rules assignments in an ad hoc fashion. Now, AWS WAF also, it's important to note that it works on a consumption model. So you're only paying for what you use, right? So if you apply a few rules, you would only pay for those rules and not for everything else. Now, instead of using custom rules that you sit down and write and review and send to different departments in your organization, you can start to use third-party provided rules where solution sellers in AWS Marketplace can provide you some of the managed rules that they've written based on the experiences they have across hundreds and thousands of customers on a day-to-day basis, and really they can start to help you not reinvent the wheel, if you will, in those cases. So some of the common ones are OWASP top 10 security risks, threats specific to content management systems or CVEs, and those kind of threats. And one example I want to talk about is Fortinet, right? So Fortinet is a marketplace vendor that offers packaged rule groups to boost efficiency, and it starts to layer Fortinet's managed rule groups on top of AWS WAF that can help you to boost your AWS WAF security without reinventing the wheel, really. And all of this is done in the background. You just need to go in and purchase those rules and apply it to AWS WAF, and it can start to take over from there. Now, let's look at some ways where customers are actually using Fortinet solutions to enhance their network security. Now, as the attack surface of your organization expands, you might start to see that your security teams become increasingly mindful of various risks that their cloud-based solutions and even APIs start to face, right? So with Fortinet, your security teams can start to analyze some of those traffic patterns at scale in order to make sure that you're configuring workload protection policies, as well as evaluating them against best practices to make sure that any risks are mitigated for your security posture. Now, they have a product called FortiGate Next Generation Firewall, and it can really start to help you accelerate deployment of some of these security requirements where you need to enact granular security policies to increase control over which entities or groups have access to the applications within your environment. It can also help you control access to applications by individuals or user groups, if you will. And then when you look at traditional firewalls, they can only block or allow traffic based on predefined rules with targets or destinations combined with ports. But when you look at Fortinet firewalls, you can intelligently detect traffic applications such as individual games or apps, right? So if you're playing a game or if you have an application installed in your environment, and that application, along with the normal traffic, injects some malicious, HTTPS or even SSH traffic within it, how are you going to detect it in a normal environment, right? So Fortinet looks at even those kind of scenarios and starts to detect and monitor malicious traffic within those applications. So really cool cool use case there to hit home the fact that they're doing a lot more than regular firewalls. Now, those are some of the benefits, but let's look at an actual customer who's benefiting from these features provided by Fortinet, right? So Nubank is one of the largest fintech companies in Latin America, and their business is entirely based on digital environments. So network security is obviously always a concern. Now, the company's rapid growth has driven the search of new technologies capable of supporting the expanded number of employees. Now, they have about 1,300 employees, and they're consistently growing.
Spam.
And
That one was spam.
sorry, looks like there was some disturbance, but yeah, what I was trying to say is the increased number of employees resulted in, they really started to see some latency issues in their environment. And when the relationship between Nubank and Fortinet began, they also needed to find solutions that could support their security team and optimize communication within their AWS cloud environment. Now, to solve for this, they chose Fortinet, including their FortiGate next generation firewall solution, and quickly realized multiple benefits from Fortinet deployment. Now, the biggest example of that is that their Wi-Fi availability has improved significantly, and the network is now much more secure, and software engineers have been saying that latency has significantly dropped in their environment. So it's a great benefit. Another benefit that they saw was they could address the company's growth challenge. Again, we mentioned 1,300 employees and growing by having an infrastructure that was ready to scale along with its business. And really help them grow in general from a network security standpoint. Now, Fortinet has recently done a cool thing where they're taking their firewall technology and offering it as a service. And this allows businesses to take a more hands-off approach as it's supported by managed services. Now, that was Fortinet and how they're helping customers. I also want to make sure that we talk about another vendor called Checkpoint and how they're helping their customers um, in a similar fashion, right? So the customer in question here is Cadence Design Systems, and they're really a global supplier of electronic design technology and engineering services to the semiconductor industry. And they have locations across 40 countries and have a large cloud infrastructure that operates across several AWS regions, right? So you can see in the diagram they have multiple environments out there, and their main goal was to minimize their attack surface and maximize security controls. They also needed full visibility in this entire cloud environment with the ability to tightly track and monitor various network configurations in their environment. Now, they also needed to make sure that obviously, in such a big environment, there must be strict access control that must be provided so that multiple user groups can access some of these environments securely. Now, to solve for this, Cadence turned to Checkpoint's CloudGuard Dome 9 solution to achieve the visibility and control that they desired. Um, the biggest benefits that they started to see is that there was a granular view of their network topology and workflow traffic, and their security teams were able to immediately inspect inbound and outbound traffic to all of their EC2 instances in a single view. So that was an important benefit to see what traffic is flowing across the entire environment. Now, the CloudGuard Dome 9 service also contains active protection, which creates an always-on enforcement of security policies. So really cool use case there. Now, another vendor I want to talk about is BitGlass and how they're helping their customers achieve network security. Now, if you've heard of a cloud access security broker or CASB, it's really a policy enforcement point that delivers data and threat protection in the cloud, and really on any device as well as anywhere. Right, so it doesn't have to be one place or just the cloud. It spans multiple places. Now, Northwestern University, a research institution, which most of you have probably heard about, required a solution that could scale with their university's needs while protecting hundreds of terabytes of institutional data. And this university is also home to a large medical school, so they needed to comply with HIPAA regulations. Now, um, there was no way that they could roll out agents to 50,000 plus users at Northwestern University, and it was simply not possible to do that. So, to solve for this, they looked at BitGlass's agentless solution, which was a great fit at Northwestern to provide that protection on any app, any device, and really anywhere. So that agentless approach helped them achieve their requirements. Along with sensitive requirements like data at rest as well as in transit, um, and really rapid incident response and management with user behavior. So so that was another cool use case where BitClass was helping Northwestern University secure the environment. Now, quickly, I want to talk about, since we spoke about our solution sellers, I want to talk about AWS Marketplace, where you can find all of these solution sellers and really, get around reinventing the wheel for some of the solutions that you will build on the networking side. Now, one of the cool things that AWS Marketplace does is it gives you a digital software catalog where you can go and search for third-party solution sellers and really look for the specific solutions and features that you're looking for. And the biggest benefit that you will see here is you can start to procure software in a more cloud-like way and really pay for what you're using. So instead of provisioning software provided by third parties where you buy a bulk license for the entire year and really pay for the entire years of usage or peak usage, you can really purchase software that scales as you go, and you only pay for that aspect of it. And there's really a variety of solutions that you can look at, and we've highlighted some network security providers in this slide, and really, you can start to experiment initially, look at some solution providers, see which work for you, and then start to purchase large number of licenses if you're looking for a lot of usage over a prolonged period of time. We have different kind of pricing models also available. So apart from free trials and pay as you go, once you hone in on a solution that you need, you can start to look at an annual or multi-year license model where you can start to really see significant savings for some of these vendors. If you have some licenses already on premises that you want to bring over, we also support bring your own license for some vendors. And then we also have private offers where you can have seller provided private negotiation offers as well as pricing brought in directly into marketplace. And then from a deployment standpoint, there's, again, a lot of different options available, including SaaS, AMIs, containers, machine learning. So a lot of different options available for you in there. And to really summarize, I want to highlight the point that there's a lot of great solutions out there, right? It may be overwhelming to see all of these solutions out there, um, uh, but instead of going out and reinventing the wheel on your own, you can start to look at some of the solutions that AWS Marketplace provides with respect to third-party solution sellers in the networking space, and really start to see which work for you. Um, uh, and you're not alone, right? We have a solutions architecture team that is available to help you out with any questions. You can reach out um, to our team if you need any assistance with respect to choosing a vendor or doing a POC, and really start to leverage some of these AWS services with your environment to make sure that your network is in the best shape possible. Now, I want to conclude on that note and really thank you for your time today and sticking with us. And if you have any feedback for us or questions for us, feel free to fill out the survey at the end and let us know if you want to talk about security or networking in general. So again, a big thank you for you to thank you for listening to us today, and looking forward to hearing from you.